For the next several weeks, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the sonnet. We'll be trying to understand how they're organized, what they have to say, and we'll even be trying to write them ourselves. For today's video, we're going to just take a look at the fundamentals of the sonnet, how they operate and how they're different from other poems. So let's start with a basic definition here. The sonnet is a fixed form poem. What that means is that it's a poem that doesn't really have much variances in terms of its structure. A sonnet is 14 lines, and most of them have a particular set line length. And that means it's a very condensed form of poetry. It's a kind of poetry where almost every word plays a part in establishing the poem's meaning. Sonnets also have a particular rhyme scheme that they operate by. These can vary depending on the kind of sonnets, and we'll get more into that in a moment. But a rhyme scheme is simply a kind of, again, a sort of fixed structure to the poem. One sonnet writer describes the sonnet as a place of infinite riches in a little room. And it's that idea that I want you to think about as we read these sonnets, that given the constraints of the space, how does the poet make use of every word? How does the poet put an extra emphasis on every line? How does the poet contain so much emotion in such a little space? Something that we'll continue to look at and hopefully work on in our own writing. In today's video, we're focusing on the Shakespearean or Elizabethan sonnet, a kind of sonnet that obviously came out of England and is a bit different from a Petrarchan or Italianate sonnet. Like other sonnets, it is 14 lines, but it has a very particular rhyme scheme and a very particular structure. It's made up of 3 quatrains. You can imagine the quatrain as sort of the body paragraph, if you will, of the sonnet. And a quatrain, as you might be able to guess here, is a unit of 5 lines. It concludes with a rhyming couplet. That, of course, is 2 lines in which they rhyme together. As I mentioned, Shakespearean sonnets have a very particular rhyme structure, and it looks like this. The first quatrain is A, B, A, B. The second quatrain is C, D, C, D. The third quatrain is, and I'm going to come up here now, is E, F, E, F. And the final rhyming couplet is G, G. Now, if you're confused, what these letters represent is merely a rhyming sound. So, for example, A might here be the sound, let's say, B, of the word be, and this A would be C. This B variable right here might be the word way, and this might be the word say. Make sense? So this is the rhyme scheme, and as you can see, we divide it into the quatrains. So here we have Quatrain 1, Quatrain 2, Quatrain 3, and then the rhyming couplet at the end. So as we always do, we're going to read Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare aloud. And to help me here, I'm going to use an accomplished Shakespearean actor, David Tennant, to read it. And you're going to see a little ball kind of bouncing along the words. And I know it looks kind of silly. It might remind you of kids shows growing up. But my point here is to kind of show you the rhythm and meter as we go along. So listen carefully, read the text along with us, and then we'll break down this poem and try to understand how it's working as a sonnet.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
So I hope you saw there that at times that ball that I was using sort of came to rest, especially right here. As we listened to David Tennant read it, you could see that at times it moved more quickly, at other times it slowed down. And we'll talk about why this is and what this might reveal. But this is sort of the first sonnet that we're really going to take an in-depth look at here. So what we're looking at here is just really the final words of each line of the sonnet. And I wanted you to really just kind of see here the structure. So we have three quatrains, where you see that A, B, kind of structure coming out. Sorry for my poor handwriting. Here we have C, D, C, D. And then E, F, E, F. And then finally G, G. So, again, three quatrains, 1, 2, 3, and then our rhyming couplet at the end. And we'll talk about the significance of that rhyming couplet when we get there. But as you can see, it does provide a sort of counterpoint to the structure of the rest of the sonnet. So what I'm trying to show you here in this slide is how the sonnet might break down into its parts. Here we have, again, the three quatrains, which, as you notice, sort of have an organization to themselves. You might see that at the end of each quatrain, we have a mark of punctuation that brings it to a close. And we'll look at each quatrain to try to understand what's going on. But for now, just notice, again, this kind of structure in the sonnet. This is a great thing to keep in mind as you first approach the sonnets, is to try to kind of break them down into parts if you're having trouble understanding it at first. So here we're going to look at quatrain 1. And at this point, I need to introduce a very important concept, so pay attention. This is the fact that most sonnets present to us a problem. The problem is sort of the impetus for the sonnet. It's what's making the speaker speak out. And in this case, let's see if we can identify what that problem might be. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. So at this point, you might want to pause and try to figure out for yourself, what is the problem of this sonnet? Okay, you might have realized that the problem of this sonnet is that the speaker is finding it actually hard to compare his beloved to a summer's day, which in most cases we would think would be a natural comparison, right? You're trying to praise someone's beauty in a summer's day, as we all too recently know, is a very beautiful thing, right? But he's finding that, in fact, the comparison fails. And the poem, for a number of lines here, will go on to tell us why that is. He finds, as he says here, that his lover is more lovely and more temperate than a summer's day. Okay? As we know, the word temperate here means, not too hot, not too cold. So this person, is not like the scorching days of August, but perhaps is a more kind of kind, gentler day than a summer's day. Now, May is a time that it's also a temperate time, but as he points out here, rough winds shake the darling buds of May. Another reason that this simile is inadequate for him is that a summer's lease ends all too soon, as you guys all well know. So he's finding that he wants his lover to be more permanent than that. So again, our problem here is that he doesn't know how to best compare his beloved to. Okay, so now he's going to expand upon that list. Let's see here. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. and every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. So here we're again expanding on the reasons why he cannot compare his beloved to a summer's day. The first reason here offered in the first line of this quatrain is that the eye of heaven, which, as you might have guessed, is the sun, shines too hot. Hopefully the lover doesn't do that. But another problem with that eye of heaven, which is the his here, the antecedent of that pronoun his, is he's often dimmed. What do you think he might be dimmed by? If you're thinking clouds, you'd be correct, right? So sometimes there are those cloudy summer days. Another reason the comparison is inadequate. And finally, he says, and every fair, here I want you to read this as a noun for some kind of thing. Every fair thing from fairness sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. So here he's finding another problem with the natural world, and another reason that it's an inadequate comparison is that fair things often become unfair, or fair things often become less than fair or ugly. Now, of course, you might be thinking this is true of humans too, but we'll see why his lover might be an exception to that rule in a moment. So just to review here again, the beloved here is falling short of, is exceeding the possible comparison of a summer's day. Summer can be too hot, summer can be too cloudy, summer can sometimes decline into fall and winter. So again, all these reasons why the beloved should not be compared to a summer's day. Okay, so now that we're looking at, again, Quatrain 3 here, we're moving towards the poem's conclusion. Here, the speaker is making a very important move here, and this is as the beginning of the movement from problem to resolution. Okay, so again, our problem was, what can I compare my beloved to? Now he's moving towards a resolution of why he cannot compare his speaker to a summer's day, and why his speaker kind of almost exceeds that comparison. Okay. Now speaking directly to the beloved with the pronoun here, thy, he's saying that the speaker's eternal summer will never fade, unlike, we all want summer to last forever. We all want summer to be the endless summer. But he's saying that's something the beloved, the subject of this poem, doesn't have to suffer. It will not fade. And we still haven't figured out why, but we'll find out in a moment. I also want to underline here the importance of this word but, as marking that turn from problem to resolution. And this is a part of the poem that's often called the volta. The volta. Okay, and this is the turn from problem to resolution, and sometimes it's signified with a conjunction like but. Okay, so second line here, the subject will not lose possession of that fair. Again, here that's going to mean that fairness, beauty. Okay, that she owes or that he owes. And the subject can also say that death cannot wander in his shade. Okay? Or I'm sorry, death cannot say that the subject is wandering in his shade. And here is where we're finding the answer to all of that. And it's because in eternal lines to time thou growest. I want you to notice here the sort of contrasting here between the fading of summer, the fading of the natural world, the fading of beauty, and the actual growing of the beauty of the lover in these eternal lines. Now, eternal lines is a direct reference to this sonnet itself. It's saying that his sonnet will preserve and, in fact, make the beauty grow of the subject. Okay, so finally we're getting to the rhyming couplet here now, which, as you notice, doesn't only have a rhyme, two sounds that rhyme, two rhyming sounds there, but also even has, a similar start there with the so long, so long. People think the rhyming couplet kind of is the room of the sonnet kind of closing. It's the door closing. It's the clasp shutting on it. It gives a sort of feeling of finality, and this is why so many of Shakespeare's soliloquies conclude with a rhyming couplet. But you'll see here that, again, the beauty will grow in those eternal lines, as we talked about. As long as men can breathe or eyes can see, as long as this, and this is the poem, okay, and the poem gives life to thee, okay? This is something summer can't brag about, right? This is something, every year summer goes through this cycle. Summer fades from the beauty of summer into, the coldness of winter. But in this case, it's actually the subject's beauty will increase, it will exceed. Now, I want you to notice something here about this couplet. About this sonnet. I said, the sonnet was about the speaker's beloved, that it was a love sonnet. But if you notice something, it's also a sonnet about the speaker's or the poet's own powers, a sort of claim for him to posterity, a claim that his poem will continue to live on, and in fact will live on as long as men are breathing. That's quite a bold claim here. So to a certain extent, our turn that we saw earlier is not just a turn from problem resolution, but it's almost a turn in subject matter, where we're moving from talking about the speaker's lover to now talking about his powers as a poet. And what I want to show you in this slide is just how the poem kind of builds up its argument, especially using some conjunctions like and, but, nor, so. Here kind of developing this. And if you notice something, this sonnet 18 is just two sentences, two complete sentences, meaning we only have one end stop punctuation and another right there. One more unusual thing about this poem that I'd like to show you is the fact that it only has one mark of punctuation in the middle of a line. This mark of punctuation is called, and I'm going to type this out so I don't mess it up, a caesura. Okay. And a caesura is a pause in the middle of a line. It can come from a comma, a period, a semicolon, but it helps to kind of slow down the line. And we really saw that in David Tennant's reading, where that line was kind of the slowest. And there was a pregnant pause there where that comma is. Now, this is just to review. Again, sonnet 14 lines. There's a problem in resolution. There's going to be a turn in that sonnet. And that the Shakespearean sonnet is organized by 3 quatrains of alternating rhyme, concluding with a rhyming couplet. In our next slide, we'll get a little more into the nitty-gritty. In our next video, we'll get a little more into the nitty-gritty, where we'll talk about something called iambic pentameter. And we'll kind of figure out exactly what that means and how it's used in an Elizabethan sonnet. Okay, there'll be a short quiz on this tomorrow, so be ready, and we'll also take a look at some new Shakespeare sonnets, and you'll practice some of these terms and skills that we've worked on in this video.